Russia is expanding its influence in Africa, deepening ties in North Africa, the Central African Republic, and the Sahel. Russia is also rekindling its Cold War ties in Southern Africa. For more perspective, VOA's Paul Ndiho spoke with Paul Nantulya, a research associate at the Africa Center for Strategic Studies at National Defense University here in Washington.
Is trying to circumvent the sanctions that have been placed on it by the United States and other countries and organizations. And so the primary motivation is not really ideological, but it is economic. It is strategic. Russia wants to have continuing relevance at the international level and wants to be able to prove to the United States and to Western countries that it still has diplomatic allies, it still has the ability to conduct international relations despite the sanctions. As you know, Putin has been indicted by the International Criminal Court. But I think what is important to note is that that effort is running into intense competition with the likes of China. China, as you know, has significantly expanded its engagements in Africa, economically, militarily, in terms of security, in terms of its loan instruments, finance instruments, as well as infrastructure. China is on the African continent in a very big way.
The diplomatic role between the West and Russia. Obviously, a lot of African countries came to the aid or supported Russia at the peak of the Ukraine war. Could that be one of the things where Russia is trying to say, hey, you guys stood by my side, now this is some kind of payback?
Russia is using pretty much the Chinese playbook by working with these African countries to rekindle those memories of the anti-colonial and anti-apartheid struggles, where, of course, the Soviet Union is one of those powers that that supported these struggles. And so we see that language coming back to the mainstream. We see that language being deployed by a number of African countries, by Russia itself. But what is very interesting is that Russia is following a Chinese playbook, because that's exactly what happened on the Chinese side. The only difference is that on the Chinese side, the instrument of influence was economic, mainly economic, and to some extent diplomatic and security. With Russia, it's the exact opposite, because economically speaking, Russia doesn't really have much to offer. China's trade with African countries is almost 7 times more than Russia's trade with African countries. But what Russia is putting on the table for these African countries is the use of its state-owned mercenaries.
We saw a little bit of that play out, especially during the most recent coups in West Africa. And some of those leaders who have taken power since then have strategically reached out to Russia to ask for support. You're looking at Mali, Burkina Faso, you are looking at Niger.
Fundamentally, it is also an indication of the lack of capacity, right? Because if you have capacity to respond to insurgent activity and to terrorist insurgents, as we saw in Mali and other places, then there'll be no need to take a step as controversial as requesting a foreign power to supply mercenaries. Mercenaries do what they do for payment, right? So, with Russia's mercenaries, for instance, some of the payments are in foreign currency, but then they're also paid with access to mining operations, such as in the Central African Republic.
Well, that was Paul Nantulya, a research associate, Africa Center for Strategic Studies, National Defense University, here in Washington.